How do you assemble fins that are multiple pieces and making sure that both sides are nice and flat? That's what I'm going to cover in this video.
Welcome to Advanced Construction Videos, where we show you how to tackle rocketry, building techniques, and more. On our website, we sell kits, motors, building supplies, and electronics. So come and learn, shop, build, and fly when you visit us at apogeerockets.com.
Hi, I'm Tim Van Milligan from Apogee Components. Today I'm going to cover how to assemble a multiple piece fin like this one here, which is made out of 3 pieces. You got this top piece here, you got this bottom piece here, and then you have this little cross piece right here. In a previous video, and you can look this one up, and I think we'll have a link to it, we discussed why you would make a fin that is multiple piece. Like on this one right here, we want the grain direction on this little piece going vertically. That makes it really hard to break it this way. Where if it was going horizontally, the wood grain would snap really easy. So that's one reason. And then the other reason is maybe it would be too big for the piece of wood that is in the kit. So in this video, I want to show you how to make sure that both sides are nice and flat. So when you get your fins, the first technique is don't sand the wood. So typically in a lot of kits, we recommend sanding the surface of the wood while it's still in the balsa sheet, or a lot of people will pop them out like this one right here, and then just start sanding them with a sanding tee like this. You know, just sand, sand, sand. Because if you sand them, what you're going to do is you're going to minimize the thickness where both pieces aren't exactly the same height. Even if you have them in the balsa sheet, it is still possible to mess them up by sanding them, because once you sand them and you glue them together, you may have to sand them a second time. And depending on the fin, like this one right here has a tab for a through-the-wall fin system. When you start if you sand it twice, you're going to make that wood really thin, and it's going to go into a slot on a tube, and now the slot is wide where the balsa wood is skinny. So it's going to want to flop around, and you're going to have to fill that gap with some kind of glue in order to make a nice strong joint. Where if the wood was thick and it went into the slot and there was very little room, then you get a nice tight joint. So don't sand the fins until after you have them assembled. The second tip that I have is to use a very, very flat surface. Now the flattest surface that I have is a sheet of glass, and this is tempered glass. It's not an ordinary piece, so if it dropped, it would shatter into 1,000 pieces. But no one piece is very sharp that you have to worry about, getting injured. So always use tempered glass if you're going to do this. If you don't, find the smoothest, flattest surface that you can use. I've been using this for a while now, and it's got glue drops on it, so it's a little bit bumpy. It looks pretty smooth, and I try to keep it smooth, but with those little lumps of glue on there, that's going to cause, issues. So I try to use glass if I have it, or a nice smooth surface. So when you put them on there and glue them together, everything, you're at least starting with the bottom side is perfectly flat. And then if you glue them together, then hopefully the top side will be flat too. The other thing that I would recommend is getting a sheet of plastic and putting it down on your table, because when you apply glue to the edges, and I'll show you here, and that was glued in. Let me get my glasses here. You're going to run a bead of glue on your parts, and I would recommend you do this the same way you do a model rocket fin. Do a double glue joint. So you put a little glue on, let it dry, put some on the other end, and then you're going to let that dry. Wipe off any excess glue. And then, you're going to do it again. You're going to put some more on. I'm just going to speed things up here by ignoring that. But that's going to give you the best, strongest glue joint. Then, on your nice flat table, put them together And then when you bring them together, some glue is going to ooze out. It's going to ooze out the bottom and it's going to ooze out the top. And you want to take a paper towel and then wipe that off. You know, typically I can pick this up and you can see that the fin is sticking there because some glue oozed out. And that's the reason I wanted to use plastic, because otherwise it's going to stick to your surface. So that's why I use plastic. So let me get another one here. This is a fin from the Peregrine Junior rocket. And if you're gluing balsa wood together, so here's, this first fin was just a simple line. It's just a simple cut. And I had it wrong backwards, like that. If it's a simple line, you don't need to do a dry fit. But a lot of kits, particularly the ones that we make at Apogee Components, we make them like a jigsaw puzzle for a specific reason. And that reason is so that you can only assemble them in one direction. So if I try to flip this one over and assemble it this way, you can see it's not going to fit because that's not the way it was intended to go together. So you want to dry fit them together first, just to make sure that you know how they're going to fit together. And then the second reason is you want to see if there's any movement in the fins. Like this one right here, this is how a lot of manufacturers make their rocket multiple piece fins. Here at Apogee Components, we don't do it this way. But what they do is they take their wood and then they just make a single cut. And when they go back together, the thickness of the laser beam is actually what's causing that movement right there, because it's actually burning away the wood. So what we try to do is we'll make the shape and then we'll add a little bit of extra balsa wood to the side by moving the cut line over just a smidge, so that when they go together, they're going to be nice and tight. But this one is very loose. And because it's very loose, I would recommend that you glue it together using wood glue, like this right here. Because when you put it together and the glue oozes out, it's going to fill the gaps. See, the only problem with making it like a jigsaw puzzle is it's hard to get into all the little corners. So in this situation, I want a little excess glue, and the reason is, you can see my glue mess there, is I want to fill those gaps. So now the glue, what oozed up on the top and oozed out on the bottom, I want to, try to take that glue and work it into the gap so that I could fill them. And then at that point, anything excess you'd wipe off. Okay, and then at this point, leave it on the table to dry. If you have another piece of plastic, I would put that on top, and then you could put, some heavy books on it as well to hold it flat while it's dry. The downside of wood glue is that it has water in it, and that water is going to, water and wood kind of can warp things. So you can't use a lot of glue, and you have to be prepared that that glue, might warp the wood. And then the other thing is it does allow for the parts to shift around a little bit. So it's possible, like right here, I manually tweaked it. But if you don't lay something heavy on top of it, you could get a stair stepper like right here. Okay, so make sure your fins are nice and flat, and then push them together if there's any gaps in there to try to even those out. All right, so next, my next example is this one right here. Let me get this out of the way. This is a three-piece fin. And This is the way that Apogee is now designing it. Like I said, we're trying to design it so that when you put them together, there's no gaps, so things aren't shifting around. That makes a stronger fin, and then you don't have to use wood glue. So on this one right here, I'm going to put it together, but I want to point out, like right here, the wood grain is going in this direction, and so that right there is the weak point. So kind of look at your fins, decide if there's any weak points. So now this one right here is the wood grain is going this way. So I don't see any weak points, except for maybe like right here coming off of that corner and maybe coming off of this corner right there. So I have to be careful when putting them together. So when I put this together, you can see it's a really tight fit and it doesn't move around a lot. There's no slop in that one at all. And then there's a third piece that goes right here. And I'm going to push that one in. You can see that one I have to push in with a lot of energy to make sure it's in all the way. And then you want to, run your finger across it and see if it's flat. So like on this one right here, I can feel a little high point right there. So if I run my fingernail, I can catch it. So I need to push that one down a little bit harder. So I'm going to take a ruler and try to push it down. There we go. It's a little bit better. The back side, it shows nice and flat. So because this is so tight, I would not use wood glue on these types of fins. For this, I would use water-thin super glue, because once you have it like this, I can just take a drop and it will wick into that gap. It looks like it's really tight, but there's just enough room for some water-thin super glue to go into there. And then I would flip it over. And again, if you're using super glue, make sure you have plastic on your surface, because otherwise you will glue your fin to the surface table that you're working on. Okay. So now this one is nice and tight and flat. And if I pick it up and I look at it, I could put my ruler on it, and there's no gaps between the edge of the ruler and the fin on either side. So I know I got it nice and flat. But when you're done, you still want to sand that surface. So that's what I'll do next. So here I got some sandpaper on a sanding block, and then I just sand it down to make sure that nothing's sticking up. So that's just sliding over really nice and smooth. Flip it over. Okay, so both of them have been sanded. And then the other thing that I would do is, even though you're rubbing your finger across and it's sliding over nice and easy, there might be still a very tiny gap right there. It's like thin as a knife blade. To fill that, I would recommend a wood filler, either the Elmer's wood filler or the Tamiya basic putty type that we sell here at Apogee. Either of them will work. What I like to use is kind of something flat, either a razor blade or one of these chisel-ended hobby blades. And we sell these here at Apogee too. And I like these because you can put it in a handle and you can hold it like a pencil. And so I'll take some wood putty, which just looks like putty, a little pasty like that. Just take a little bit, and then you would just take your knife blade and just run it into those cracks along the edges, just to make sure that everything's filled. What this will do is when you go to prime it and paint it, it's going to require less primer to fill any gaps. So you can see I'm just flapping it around. You have to do both sides like this. But this one right here I can tell I got a lot of gaps. So this one definitely right here I need to fill. Just like that. So you do both sides to make sure that all your gaps are filled. And then this one I did earlier, so I could feel the wood filler on top. So I'll just sand that off nice and flat again. Always sand on a nice flat surface like this. Try not to hold it in your hand if you want it really flat, because what that does is you're going to have pressure points, and you can actually kind of bow the wood. You know, where it touches your finger, it's going to be high, and over here it's going to be high, and then there's going to be a little valley in the middle. So if you lay it on a nice flat surface, and when you sand like this, you won't have any pressure points that are going to cause the fin to be non-uniform thickness. And so once your fin is put together, then you can start airfoiling it. You know, if you wanted to round the edges, I could start rounding the edges off. At this point, you have to hold it in your hand, but I'm just trying to get the edge. And then, you know, particularly this root edge, you want to make sure that that's nice and flat. So sand it like this. So, you know, run your finger along that joint right there where the two pieces come together. Make sure it's nice and flat. You can also put a piece of sandpaper on your surface and sand like this. That works just as well. All right, so that is the technique of putting together multiple piece fins so that they're both, you know, the whole surface is nice and flat. My name again is Tim Van Milligan. This is the Apogee Rocketry Workshop. May the winds be light, may the skies be blue, and may all your rockets fly straight and true.